Hi, this is Carol from Crinkled Path. I was just jumping in last minute to a challenge that is being put on by the Junk Journal Inspirations Facebook group, and it is a 5-item Easter spring challenge that ends tomorrow, so that's why I'm jumping in last minute. But I thought that I would go ahead. I've been kind of stuck because I have this page is next with some milk on it, and I have an idea of something I want to do with the page, but I haven't been able to find my ephemera that I want to use yet. So I thought, I said this was not going to be a rules chronological or successive journal, so I was like, what am I fretting about? Just jump to the next page. So I'm going to do the challenge today, and for the challenge, you were allowed 5 items. The first item was you were allowed book pages. So I pulled both a blank book page and this garden book page. You were allowed to use either one of an embossing folder, stamps, or die cuts. So I chose stamps. Then you had to choose between fabric, lace, or ribbon, and I chose this piece of fabric. Then you had to choose between a tag, an index card, or a file folder. So I grabbed a plain file folder. And then you're allowed to have 2 types of embellishments. And so for my embellishments today, you could use 2 different types of embellishments, and you can use as many as you want of those. I've only so far decided on the seed packets. These are vintage seed packets that I recently found at a thrift store. This one's dated 1978, and I believe this one is from the 80s. But I'm going to use those 2, and then I still have one more embellishment that I can choose, so we'll see what I'm inspired to do. So I thought that I would start by putting the fabric down as the back of my page. And the thing that came to mind when these seed packets popped up at the thrift shop was that my dad had built some little garden boxes for my mom and I. And I think I'm actually going to wrap this around the page. So I'm going to glue it down with my Fabri-Tac while I'm talking. My dad had built these garden boxes for my mom and I, and I remember just planting a few different things, and one of them was radishes. My mom really loved radishes. I have to say, I'm only really a fan of them on street tacos. So I planted radishes, but I don't know that I ever ate any of the radishes that I planted when I was a child. We also planted carrots, and then I was allowed to plant some flowers. And I remember pulling the marigold heads off my mom's marigolds when they were dry and pulling the seeds out of them and planting them. And I also remember planting California poppies. And to this day, I still love golden poppies growing in my yard. I'm going to put this fabric on and wrap it around. Just make sure I don't do 2 pages. And then I'm going to try to make a pocket out of my file folder. All right, so I have that. And then I think I want my pocket made out of the file folder, but I kind of want it to look like it's a pocket on pants or on a apron or something. And I want the pocket big enough to hold my seed packets. So I think I'm going to turn it over That's good. And then I think I want to make a template. Let me, because otherwise it won't be the same on both sides. I have this little tablet that I will keep beside me when I'm filming, so that if I need to write something down to include in the description box, I can write it down. I'm gonna measure where the halfway point is. 12.5 is 6.25. So about there. So that'll be my halfway mark. And then when I put this down at a similar angle, it should be close enough. Okay, now I'm gonna cut this out. So this will be my pocket. I may see if I have more of this fabric to cover the rest of the page. I'm also going to run real quick to my sewing machine and sew around the pockets. So one of the rules in the challenge was that you could use any tools that you have and your inks and paints and colors, but the actual embellishments were what was limited to just the ones that they had chosen and 2 extras that you get to pick. This is on the hinge, so I like that will flip up, and then I will be able to glue around it. And so I'm gonna go sew, and then I'll be back. Found another panel of this quilt piece so that I can finish the edge down here. I think I'm gonna do it this way. And then I'm just going to clip it across. See if it'll tear, because it'll tear straighter then I can cut it. You just have to clip over the seams, and then you can usually tear fabric, and you can guarantee it's going to tear straight because it's tearing along the fibers. All right, I'm going to put this in, and then look at my pocket. I'm so excited. I went ahead and did 3 different colors of stitching on this because in the 70s we wore kind of crazy jeans, although you never would have seen jeans this color. They would have been blue jeans, but I thought with the fabric it kind of goes. And I wanted to stick to the rules about using the file folder, so let me glue this in. I think I'm going to want this down here. So I'm going to just go ahead and glue along the edges to make my pocket in the back of the pocket. And since I'm gluing to fabric, I'm going to go ahead and use the Fabri-Tac again. Everywhere that I ended and started the stitching, I want to reinforce it just a little bit with my art glitter glue, just so that it doesn't unravel over the years of this being flipped open and closed. So this is going to have to dry for a little while. Thankfully this glue dries pretty quickly, but I'm just going to dab these corners and places where the thread can get stressed, and then the areas where I started and stopped. I want to tuck my seed packets in the pocket. because I can put journaling inside of them. And then I also want to make a couple more seed packets, and I will do one out of this garden book page. And all I'm going to do for that is take one of my other seed packets as a measuring guide. I'm going to fold it and then I'm going to cut it down. So I think just to start, I'm going to cut it the length of these pictures, just so that I can hopefully get a nice straight edge to start. Didn't quite fold it perfectly straight. There we go. Tuck you back in.
Turn around this end.
Fold this over. And then to make the flaps, we cut into the corners. This one I'm just going to tuck in. So then we have another little seed envelope. Can be tucked in there for more journaling. And then we still have our stamping, which actually, I think I might go ahead and do that inside. But just because I have some kind of rough edges here and some smudges on the inside of this folder, I might just go ahead and line it with some nice clean paper. This paper has a little age to it, but at least it's smooth, which will be important for that stamp because it has some really fine lines in it. So I'm going to use my Stays On ink pad in jet black because it's very waterproof. And I think I'm going to put my little sunflower on top. And last, a sentiment that says, plant seeds of happiness, watch a friendship grow. It's a 2000 Stampin' Up! Stamp. This whole set is from 2000. Pull out my watercolor pencils. The fun thing about the watercolor pencils is that you can add shading, and then when you go in with your wet paintbrush after the fact, it will blend it. So you don't have to be terribly precise with this kind of thing, because it's going to get smoothed out with the water. And I just kind of follow the cues from the stamping here, because they have some cross hatching where the shading is, and so I'm just coloring the darker colors there. And then when I go in with water, I'm just going to start with the lightest colors and then blend into the dark, or start with the dark and blend into the lighter, so that way it doesn't start looking all the same. So if you aren't a part of a Facebook group yet, I recommend the Junk Journal Inspirations. They have lots of tutorials and different files that you can access to learn from past lessons, and it seems to be a very encouraging community. I've only posted a couple of things there so far, and I've gotten some real kind responses, so that's been good. And so this is the first time I've tried a challenge or an event on there. I think there's a new host, Emily, and this is her first time posting an event, so I thought I'd give it a try. I've been interested in just some inspiration from some YouTubers that I've watched recently that are kind of inspiring me to try a couple other new things in my journal, even though I still plan to do the memory keeping journaling. I like some of the techniques they've been doing, and so you might see those in upcoming videos soon. And of course I will link the Facebook group here if I can, and definitely will link the Junk Journal Inspirations video about the challenge, even though I realize that by the time I post this it may possibly be done, and so sorry about that. Maybe next time, if I do the next event, I'll be more on board earlier and I can get it posted before it's done. So the thing I remember about gardening with my mom was that our garden was very simple, but I really enjoyed getting to watch things grow and dig in the dirt, and it was so exciting to pick our first carrots and watch our flowers. And I was taught, you know, early on about not picking our native California poppies because they're our state flower, and so you're not allowed to pick them. It's illegal, but you can pick them if you grow them in your own yard. And so that was the fun part of planting, was that I could have my own. I think I'm going to wait on her skin because I don't really have a good skin color in here, and I don't want to spend a lot of time blending to figure out a good color. And yeah, most of my children and reflections of childhood in this are going to be little blonde girls. That's just because that's what I was. And let's see, what color do I want for the pot? I think I'm going to blend orange and brown here to hopefully get a bit of a terracotta going. I spent every summer as a child on the farm in August in North Dakota. And we would go back and help my dad's family who farmed wheat in North Dakota back in the 70s and the 80s. And they still have, the family still owns the farm as of now, but it was many, many summers of memories that I loved being out there and being in my aunt's garden. And really, I think she probably was the one who inspired me to beg my mom to have us have a garden. I remember her when I was an adult with my two little girls, and I went to visit her when my daughters were 1 year old and 3, and I was just fascinated with her garden still then as an adult. And she asked if my little girls had a garden yet, and I was like, you know, they're 1 year old, they're 3 years old, but yeah, you're probably right. They probably love digging in the dirt and have a lot of fun with that. And so I remember her going to the house and getting a big like dairy tub, giant dairy tub, and filling it with rich North Dakota dirt. And she's like, you have to take this home and plant a garden. And so I did. We went home and we bought some half wine barrel cut planters, and we got some potting soil, and we included her North Dakota dirt, and then we let our little girls plant seeds too. And it just brought me back to these childhood memories. And I still keep a garden to this day, probably because of my mom and my aunt inspiring me to do so. And it's been an advantage in COVID to have more time to stay home and tend a garden. It's done well. That you have to kind of look at some of the bright sides of being stuck at home a lot more this last year, and the garden was a privilege I don't take for granted, to have the space to plant and the resources. So that's been really good. So did you have any outdoor or gardening experience as a kid? Do you remember playing in the dirt and making mud pies? Or I know one of the other things that we thought was really fun was when my dad would do cement work, he would have to bring in big piles of sand and dirt, and or I don't know, maybe it was just gravelly, dirty sand, but we'd have this big pile in the backyard, and he would let us take, my neighbor friend had a bunch of Matchbox cars, and he would share them with me and bring them over, and we would make roads in that mountain of sand and make parking lots and make little stick homes, and it was so much fun to play in the dirt. Whoops. All right, I think I'm gonna go get my paintbrush, and then I'll finish by doing some of her skin. I may need to do a little more shading. We'll see how it blends together once I get it wet. So again, I'm gonna start in these darkest areas. And I don't want a whole lot of water on my brush, just enough to wet the page, and then I'm just going to keep working in those dark areas first, and then I kind of drag it out to the lighter areas, and do it with a very light hand so that you don't get too much of the dark out there, and then just clean your brush between switching colors. think I might actually do some more of the green in the background, just like I just kind of pulled some of this color out onto the page. And for that, I can actually just kind of get the tip wet and then paint with that. And I just want that to be a really light wash, kind of in the background. Oh, I like that. If you want the color darker, you can actually wet the tip of the pencil, and then it'll paint really dark on there, which I'm not looking for it to be super dark, so I'm not going to do that. But just so you know, there's more than one way to use the pencils. Of course, this is a watercolor paper, so it's going to warp a little bit, but that's okay with me too. That's done, and now I want to pull from my Prismacolor color pencils. See if I can find my sort of peachy flesh color for me. Don't want her too pinky. I'm going to blend it just a little bit with an eraser. It won't erase per se, but it will lighten it up a little bit. And then I just have to keep moving my eraser because I don't want her bright pink. I'm going to leave her little pockets and ruffles white. I'll put this away. So the challenge was Easter or spring. We're well past Easter, as I'm very late on getting the project done, like I was saying. And so I decided, since all my Easter stuff is put away, I will just go ahead with a spring planting. And I actually did plant my garden, got it started. I think we're pretty unlikely to have another frost here in April. I know some of you are just coming out of winter. Our seasons are pretty subtle in changing around here. I think that turned out cute. I like it a lot. So we have our 5 elements. We have our book page. We have book page here. We have our stamp. We have our folder. We have fabric. And I'm still allowed one more embellishment if I want it. But I don't know. I'm pretty happy with the way it is right now. So I think I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. I have lots of places to tuck journaling into these pockets, and so I'll probably pick a different pocket to talk about the learning not to pick my California poppies, about my mom's radishes that I never ate, and probably write some about the time on the farm as a child. That's it for today. Thanks so much for joining me, and I hope to see you next time when I come back to the milk page, or maybe we'll move on to the next. All right.